When the blind boy's humiliation began, it happened in full view of his father's entire household. Young Minho, 12 years old, small for his age, with dark glasses resting on his nose and a white cane beside him, had been searching for the dining hall on his own. His father had insisted on it. "You will not be carried through this world," Kwan Duk-soo had told him that morning, his voice the kind of flat and quiet that made grown men straighten their backs. "You will learn every corner of this house until it is yours." So Minho had tried. He had counted steps the way his mobility teacher had taught him. Left at the 5th door. Forward until the air changes. Right when you smell the kitchen. But someone, and they would later find out it was deliberate, had moved a decorative bench into the middle of the hallway. Minho's cane caught the leg of it. He stumbled. He didn't fall completely, but his glasses slipped sideways, and his cane clattered loudly against the tile floor, and the sound of it rang through the hall like a bell announcing something shameful. 3 of the household's younger male staff members were nearby, kitchen runners mostly, boys not much older than Minho himself, who had been hired through a staffing agency and who had not yet learned what it truly meant to work in the house of Kwan Duk-soo. One of them, the tallest, with a sharp chin and restless hands, laughed first. It wasn't loud. It was worse than loud. It was the kind of laugh that's meant to be heard only by the people nearby, the kind that creates a circle of cruelty so small and intimate that the person being laughed at feels completely alone inside it. "I goo," the tall one muttered, loud enough. "The young master can't even walk straight." Another one snickered. "His father commands half this city, and his son can't find the dining room." Minho stopped. He crouched slowly, reaching for his cane with practiced, careful hands. His face was absolutely still. That was the thing about Minho. He had learned early that showing pain only gave people more of what they wanted. So he kept his expression like still water. But his fingers, searching the floor, they were shaking. And that was the moment she appeared. Nobody had noticed Esther Randy in the hallway. That was, in many ways, the story of Esther's entire life. She occupied spaces without people registering her presence until she did something impossible to ignore. She was 23 years old, with a round face and deep brown skin that caught light warmly, and she was built the way she had always been built, full and soft and wide, in a household that seemed to value only sharp and small and quiet. She had been carrying a basket of freshly folded linens, heading toward the east wing, wearing the standard gray uniform that all junior maids wore. She had watched the moment unfold from the far end of the hallway. She had seen the boy stumble. She had seen the bench, placed wrong, placed cruelly wrong. She had seen the laughter, and something had shifted in Esther Randy's chest that she couldn't entirely name, because she knew what it felt like to be laughed at for the way you existed in a body that other people found easy to mock. She set the basket down against the wall. She walked, not ran, walked, with purpose and calm, straight to Minho, crouched beside him, and placed the cane in his hand, before he had to search another second for it. "Here," she said, in Korean so careful and deliberate, it was clear she had worked hard to learn it. "I have it." Minho turned his face toward her voice. His expression shifted. Not gratitude yet, something more like surprise. "Who are you?" he asked. "Esther. I'm new. East Wing Laundry." She stood, and then, because she was Esther Randy, and she had grown up in a house with 4 brothers, and had never once in her life let cruelty pass without naming it. She turned to look at the 3 young men still standing nearby. Her voice, when she spoke to them, was not loud. It was something much more effective than loud. "Moving that bench into his path," she said, with the specific, measured tone of someone who has already decided they are not afraid of the consequences. Which one of you thought that was something to be proud of? Silence dropped over that hallway, like something heavy falling from a great height. The tall one with the sharp chin opened his mouth. "Mind your business, African." "Esther." She said her own name calmly, as though correcting a pronunciation. "And this is my business. Everything in this house that happens on my shift is my business. Now, move that bench back where it belongs." They stared at her. She stared back. There is a specific kind of person who does not look away first. Esther Randy was that kind of person. The bench was moved. What Esther did not know, what she had absolutely no way of knowing, was that Kwan Duk Su had seen every second of it. "Real quick, tell us where you're watching from so we can welcome you properly. And if you're new here, subscribe now and join this family. Because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that dignity still matters." He had been standing at the far end of that hallway, half concealed by the doorframe of his private study, in the way that powerful men often stand when they want to observe without being observed. He did this often. His household staff called it the watch among themselves, in whispers, the master's habit of appearing silently in places he was not expected, seeing things people assumed he would never see. He had seen the bench, placed wrong. He had known immediately it was not an accident. He had seen his son stumble. He had felt something move through him, that terrible, specific pain of a father who has already decided his child must be made strong, watching that child be hurt, and being unable to decide in the moment whether stopping it is help or harm. He had stayed still. He hated himself for it, but he had stayed still. And then he had watched a short, round, quiet maid set down her laundry basket and walk into the middle of someone else's cruelty, like it was simply the next task on her list. Kwan Duk Su was not a man who was easily impressed. He had built an empire from the ground of Gyeongju, not the empire the government knew about, the legal businesses, the properties, the foundations. The other empire, the one that required him to be feared. He had negotiated with men who had guns on their belts and fire in their eyes, and he had never once in those rooms felt anything close to wonder. He felt something close to wonder now. Not at her bravery, exactly. He had seen brave people before. He had employed brave people and had eventually, with regret, buried some of them. It was something else. The specific, unhurried quality of how she had moved, not performing courage, so not calculating risk, simply doing what she had decided was right with the calm energy of someone who had made peace with whoever she was a long time ago. He filed it away. He watched her guide Minho the remaining distance to the dining hall door, pointing out the entrance in careful Korean. He watched his son thank her, briefly, stiffly, the way Minho thanked everyone. And he watched her go back, pick up her laundry basket, and continue down the East Wing corridor as though nothing remarkable had happened. He did not summon her. Not yet. Esther had been in the Kwan household for 11 days. She had come to Gyeongju through a domestic staffing program that placed trained household workers in high-security, high-privacy homes across South Korea. The program was legitimate. Esther had verified that herself, 3 times, because she was thorough by nature. She had left her home country not because of desperation, and the way people always assumed, but because of a plan. A very specific, detailed plan that lived in a small notebook she kept in the left pocket of her suitcase. The plan was this: 3 years working abroad, saving carefully, learning the language, sending money home for her younger sister Beatrice's school fees, and then returning home with enough experience and savings to open the thing Esther had dreamed of since she was 9 years old, a proper laundry and textile care business. Modest, in her first 11 days, several in her first 11 days, several important things about the Kwan household. She had learned that the head housekeeper, a tall woman named Mrs. Yong, communicated entirely in eyebrow movements and did not raise her voice under any circumstances. She had learned that the East Wing was quieter, but colder. She had learned that the cook, on a warm older man the staff called Uncle Bay, left extra food on the warming tray on Tuesday nights for anyone who had worked a long shift, and that this small kindness was the backbone of the household's actual morale. She had learned that Minho, the young master, was not to be pitied. He had made this absolutely clear in his manner, a polite but deliberate distance that kept sympathy at arm's length. He was a reader. He read in Braille and through audiobooks, and with a specific pair of headphones he wore like armor. He was, from everything Esther could observe, brilliant. She had overheard him correct a visiting adult on a historical fact, with the breezy certainty of someone who simply could not imagine being wrong about things he had read. She had learned, through the particular silences that fell when certain topics arose among the staff, that Kwan Duk-soo was not simply a wealthy businessman. The silences told their own story. The way the older staff members never discussed what happened in the master's private meetings. The way vehicles arrived at unusual hours and left without explanation. The way fear and loyalty existed in this house, in the same breath, indistinguishable from each other. Esther had noted all of this in the careful, observational way she noted everything, the way a person notes the weather before deciding what to wear. She had not planned to intervene in the hallway, or rather, she had not planned it the way you plan a strategy. It had simply been impossible to walk past. That evening, after her shift, she sat on the narrow bed in the East Wing staff quarters, writing in her notebook. Not the plan notebook, the other one, the personal one. Today I made an enemy of 3 kitchen boys, she wrote. Possibly also broke some unspoken rule about minding my place. But Minho found the dining hall. That's what matters. She paused, added one more line. Like his father was watching. I felt it after the fact, the way you feel someone has been in a room even after they've left it. I don't know what that means yet. What it meant became clearer the next morning. Mrs. Yong appeared at Esther's station at precisely 7:45, which was not a scheduled time for Mrs. Yong to appear at Esther's station. The master wants the East Wing reception room prepared for a private meeting at 10, Mrs. Yong said, and her eyebrows communicated. This is not unusual. Your presence during preparation is, however, specifically requested. Do not ask why, because I will not tell you. Esther nodded. Yes, ma'am. She prepared the East Wing reception room with her standard thoroughness, not performative thoroughness, which she had noticed some of the other staff defaulted to when they believed they were being evaluated, but genuine thoroughness, because Esther Randy could not do something halfway. It disturbed something in her. At 9:58, she was finishing the last of it when the door opened. Kwan Duk-soo walked in. He was not what Esther had expected, though she had been careful not to build an expectation. He was perhaps 50, lean in the way of someone who had never stopped moving, with silver threading through dark hair, and a face that had clearly once been sharply handsome, and had aged into something more severe than that. He wore a plain, dark suit. He looked like someone who had long ago decided that his appearance was not where his power lived. He looked at the room. Then he looked at her. Sit, he said. It wasn't technically a question. Esther sat. He sat across from her at the low table. Not the head of it. Not a power position, simply across. And he looked at her with the same quality of attention she imagined he brought to most things. Complete and slightly uncomfortable for the person receiving it. You're Esther Randy, he said. Yes. From... He named her country correctly, the full name of it, which surprised her because most people in this house had only a vague geographic idea of where she came from. Yes, she said. "You intervened yesterday." It was not an accusation. It was an observation, delivered the way you might observe that the weather had changed. "I moved a bench that was placed in someone's path and returned a cane to someone who needed it," Esther said carefully. "No, I don't consider that intervention." Something shifted in his face, not a smile. She would learn later that Kwon Duk-soo rarely did anything as straightforward as smile. It was more like a door opening 1 centimeter in a house where all the doors were usually sealed. "The people who did it," he said, "have already been addressed." She paused. "By me. I understand if you prefer to address it in another way. I can step back from that." "What did you say to them?" She told him accurately what she had said. No embellishment. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "My son doesn't accept help easily." "He didn't accept it," Esther said. "I returned his cane. That's not help. That's just giving something back that should never have been taken." Another centimeter, another door. "What do you want?" he said, not accusingly, but with the direct quality of a man who had decided life was too short for the slow approach to important questions. "Want from working in this house?" Esther looked at him steadily. She was aware that this was the kind of question that had a clever answer and an honest answer, and she was also aware that this specific man would immediately identify the difference between the two. "To do my job well," she said. "Save money. Go home in 3 years. Open a business." "What kind?" "Laundry and textile care. Small. Mine." He looked at her for a long time. "My son," he said, "has a tutor who comes 3 times a week. What on the other days, he studies alone. He is—" A pause. The pause of a man choosing words with extreme care. "He is isolated in ways I have not been able to correct." Esther said nothing. She had a feeling the sentence wasn't finished. "I am not asking you to be his companion," Kwon Duk-soo said. "I am not asking you to treat him as anything other than the young master of this house. But I am. I am asking you to not look away from him, the way you did not look away yesterday." The room was very quiet. Esther thought about her notebook, her plan. 3 years, specific and uncomplicated. "I won't look away," she said. "I never planned to." She did not know, then, what she had agreed to. She did not know that Min-ho, in his room that same morning, had asked Uncle Bae, in the careful, casually curious voice he used when he was actually desperate for information, what the name of the maid in the East Wing was. She did not know that Uncle Bae, who had worked in that house for 19 years and had seen a great many things, had answered the question, and then stood for a moment in the kitchen doorway, thinking thoughts he kept to himself. She did not know that the 3 kitchen staff who had moved the bench had not acted alone, that someone had told them to do it, that the bench had been a test or a message aimed not at Min-ho but at his father, that the house of Kwon Duk-soo had, in recent months, developed fractures in it that the master himself was not yet fully aware of. She did not know that the staffing program that had placed her in this house had, 3 days before she arrived, received an anonymous inquiry from an unknown source asking very specific questions about her background. She did not know any of this. What she knew was that she had work to do and a plan to keep, for when that a 12-year-old boy with dark glasses and a white cane had reached for his cane on a cold tile floor with shaking fingers, and that she intended, whatever else happened in this house, to make sure that never happened again. She picked up her laundry basket. She went back to work. Don't go anywhere. The next events are brewing, and what Min-ho discovers about Esther in the next 24 hours changes everything you think this story is about. See subscribe so you don't lose this story in the feed. Min-ho found her by sound. This was how he navigated most of the world, by the specific textures of sound that other people stopped noticing the moment they learned to rely on their eyes. He knew Uncle Bay's footsteps, slightly heavier on the left side, old knee injury. He knew Mrs. Yong's by the faint whisper of her skirt, and the precise 2-second pause she took before entering any room. For he knew his father's by the absolute stillness that preceded them. Kwan Duk-soo moved through his own house, the way weather moved through a valley, felt before seen. Esther's footsteps were different from anyone else in the building. They were. And Min-ho spent considerable time that evening working out the right word. Grounded. That was it. Each step had a particular settled quality, as though she had decided exactly where her foot was going before it landed, and having decided, it committed to it completely. No hesitation, no shuffling, no the vague uncertainty that most people's walks contained without them ever realizing it. He found her in the East Wing linen corridor on the morning of the second day, by following those footsteps. "Esther Randy," he said, when he was close enough. She stopped. He could tell by the small shift in the corridor's air that she had turned toward him. "Min-ho-si," she said, which was technically the correct formal address for the young master, and which she delivered with such natural courtesy that it didn't feel like the performance it would have been from someone else. "You're from—" He named her country. He had looked it up. He consumed information the way other people consumed water, constantly and without particularly thinking about it. "Yes," she said. "Your country's capital is—" He named it correctly. A pause, where you did your research. "I do research on everyone in this house. A beat. It takes less time than most people would think." "I believe you," Esther said, and her voice had a quality in it that he was not used to. Not indulgence, not the soft, careful tone people used around him, as though he were made of something fragile. Just honest engagement. Like talking to someone who had decided up front he was worth talking to at full volume. "Why did you help me?" he asked. "I returned your cane and told 3 people to move a bench. You know what I mean." A pause. He appreciated that she didn't fill it immediately with something reassuring. "Because it was wrong," she said finally, "and nobody else was moving." Min-ho considered this. He had a complicated relationship with the concept of help. He had been helped in ways that made him feel like a problem to be managed, helped in ways that made him feel like he was being watched as an experiment. I helped in ways that made him feel like a prop in someone else's story about their own goodness. Esther's version, he was realizing, didn't feel like any of those things. It felt, strangely, like being treated as a person by someone who had simply done the math and arrived at that conclusion on their own. "I don't need assistance," he said, because he needed to establish this, the way you establish the rules of anything before you begin. "Good," Esther said. "I'm not offering any. I have my own work to do." The first unexpected thing happened on day 4. Esther was reorganizing the linen storage when she found, tucked behind a shelf of spare pillowcases, a small braille reader, the personal kind, slim and worn at the edges, that clearly belonged to Min-ho. It had his name on a small adhesive label on the back, in braille that she couldn't read, and in printed letters that she could. She brought it to Mrs. Yong, who looked at it with her eyebrows and said, "Return it to the young master's room." A pause. "Yourself." Esther knocked on Min-ho's door. A voice said, with the slight alarm of someone who had been looking for something, "Come in." She placed the braille reader on the desk to his left, in the exact spot where she had noticed his other devices tended to live. Organized by location, she had observed, with everything in his space, in a precise relationship to everything else. "Found it in the East Linen corridor," she said, "and behind the pillowcase shelf." Silence. Then, "I was looking for that." "I thought you might be." A beat. "How did you know where to put it?" "You keep things in particular spots," Esther said simply. "I notice where things live." He was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice that had shed about 3 layers of its usual careful distance, "Sit down." She sat. "You're going to be here 3 years," he said. It wasn't a question. He had, she realized, already had the same conversation with Mrs. Young or Uncle Bay that he had suggested was simply research. "That's the plan," Esther said. "Plans change." "Mine don't," she said, with the specific, comfortable certainty of someone who had built their life on the structural integrity of their own decisions. Something almost like amusement crossed his face. She caught the edge of it. He turned his face toward the window, toward the light he couldn't see but seemed to orient toward out of habit, or preference, or some private relationship with it. "My tutor comes Monday, Wednesday, Friday," he said. "On Tuesday and Thursday, I study alone. The material is," a pause, "sufficient, but there is no one to argue with." Esther looked at this 12-year-old boy, with his careful stillness, and his worn Braille reader, and his lonely Tuesdays and Thursdays. "I didn't go to a university," she said. "I know." He had done his research. "But you read." "Constantly." "What?" she told him. He told her what he was currently reading. They disagreed about something in the first 5 minutes. Genuinely, substantively disagreed, with the specific energy of 2 people who had each formed an opinion and found it immediately challenged by someone worth arguing with. Esther left Minho's room 40 minutes later, approximately 39 minutes past what she had planned, and stood in the corridor for a moment, recalibrating her schedule. Then she noticed Kwon Duk-soo standing at the far end of the corridor. He had not been there when she entered. He had clearly arrived during the 40 minutes she had been inside. He was looking at her, with an expression she couldn't fully read. Something in it looked, not soft, the wrong word entirely for this man, but it looked, perhaps like someone watching rain after a very long drought. Relieved and uncomfortable with the relief in equal measure, he turned and walked away without speaking. Esther stood in the corridor for another moment. Then she went back to her linen schedule. The second unexpected thing happened on day 7, and it was the thing that first cracked the clean surface of Esther's plan. She had been sending her weekly voice message home, to her mother and to Beatrice, her 17-year-old sister, from the small staff common room during the late shift quiet hour. She kept the messages cheerful and specific, the way her mother preferred, not, "I'm doing well," but, "The cook here leaves food out on Tuesday nights and the linen quality is excellent." When she finished, she sat for a moment in the common room quiet. And Uncle Bay, who had been sitting at the other end of the room with his evening tea, said, not unkindly, with the specific gentleness of a man who had raised 3 children and knew what distance from home looked like, "You have family back home?" "My mother. My sister Beatrice." "Beatrice," he repeated, as though collecting the name carefully. "How old?" 17. She's studying. She wants to be a doctor." Uncle Bay nodded. He poured more tea. "The master had a younger brother," he said, in the tone of someone not quite deciding to tell a story, but finding themselves in one anyway. "Brilliant boy. Everyone said so." Esther waited. "He died," Uncle Bay said simply. 14 years ago. The master, he has never." A pause. "His brother's name. Dae-hyuk." Uncle Bay, his brother's name. Dae-hyuk. Uncle Bay set down his cup. "Minho has his uncle's voice. Did you notice? Not the sound, the rhythm of it. The way he waits before answering anything important." Esther had noticed, though she wouldn't have been able to name it before now. When she went to bed that night with the weight of the story sitting somewhere in her chest. Not her story, but one of those stories that, once you've heard it, becomes part of the air you breathe in a place. On day 9, she overheard something she was not supposed to hear. It was past midnight. She had gotten up for water. Her room ran dry in cold weather, she'd learned, and was passing the East Wing service corridor when she heard voices coming from the direction of the back entrance. Saw 2 of them. Low and quick and in a dialect that Esther's Korean wasn't strong enough to fully follow, but strong enough to catch fragments. A name. Not Kwon Duk-soo's. Someone else's. A name that sounded like a position or a title. The word for the boy. The word that she was fairly certain meant leverage. Esther stood very still in the service corridor for 6 seconds. Then she walked back to her room, sat on the edge of her bed, and opened her notebook. Not the plan notebook, but the other one. She wrote, "Something is happening in this house that is not about laundry or linen or Tuesday mornings. I don't know what it is yet. I know I am not leaving until I do." She stopped, read the last sentence back to herself. She crossed out "until I do" and wrote instead, "until Minho is safe." She sat with that for a moment. Then she closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay in the dark, listening to the house breathe around her. The third unexpected thing, the one that changed everything, happened on the morning of day 11. Minho was not at breakfast. This was unusual enough that Uncle Bae noticed, and Mrs. Yong's eyebrows communicated something close to concern. Esther was not supposed to notice. Her role in the breakfast service was linen preparation, not the meal itself. But she noticed. By mid-morning, she had heard from a junior maid that Minho's personal audiobook device was missing, and that his braille reader, the one she had returned to its precise place on his desk, was also gone, and that Minho himself had been seen very early that morning near the East Wing rear corridor, the same corridor where Esther had heard the voices. She went to Mrs. Yong. "The young master," she said, quietly, directly. "Is he in the house?" Mrs. Yong looked at her for one long moment. Then her eyebrows communicated something Esther had not seen them communicate before. Genuine alarm, constrained by a lifetime of professional composure into something small and tight and terrible. "The master has been informed," Mrs. Yong said. "Is he in the house?" Esther said again. Mrs. Yong's voice dropped, just slightly. "We are not certain." Esther turned. "Where are you going?" Mrs. Yong asked. "To look for him." "That is not your—" "I know where he might be," Esther said. She was not certain she knew, but she had spent 11 days building a mental map of how Minho moved through this house. The routes he had practiced, the corners he had mastered, the places he went when the house felt too full. There was a small room at the end of the East Wing that wasn't on any staff map she'd been given. A storage room, technically, that she'd discovered because the linen allocated to it was listed separately. It was quiet. Removed. Went there. She opened the door. Minho went there. She opened the door. Minho was sitting on the floor against the far wall, his white cane across his knees, his audiobook device clutched in both hands. He had clearly been there for hours. He turned his face toward the sound of the door. "Esther," he said. Not a question. He had recognized her by her footsteps. "Heard them," he said. His voice was "heard them," he said. His voice was controlled, but underneath it was the specific, terrible sound of a child who has understood something he was not ready to understand. "Last night, I wasn't supposed to. I got up, and I heard them through the east corridor wall." "What did you hear?" Esther asked. Steady. Direct. Minho's hands on the audiobook device tightened. Someone is planning to use me," he said. "Against my father." The room was very quiet. Esther looked at this boy on the floor of his own hidden room, in his own father's house, holding his device like the one solid thing in a world that had just changed shape around him. She thought about the voices she had heard. She thought about the word that meant leverage. She thought about Kwon Duk-soo standing at the end of a corridor watching his son argue with a maid about books, with that expression like someone watching rain. "Okay," Esther said. Min-ho turned his face toward her. "Okay? We're going to figure this out." A pause. "Your father needs to know what you heard. Will you tell him?" Silence. Long and complicated. The silence of 12 years of a son and a father who loved each other through armor so thick, neither could always feel the warmth of it. "He'll take it away," Min-ho said quietly. "Whatever small freedom I have. He'll lock everything down. He won't trust me to—" "He will," Esther said. "Because you came to him first. That's different from him finding out another way." Min-ho was quiet for a long moment. "You don't know my father?" "No," Esther said, "but I know what I saw on his face in that corridor. And that man, whatever else he is terrified of losing you." A very long silence. "I'll tell him," Min-ho said. "But I want you there." Esther opened her mouth, closed it. "I'm the East Wing laundry maid." "I know what you are," Min-ho said, with the precise, flat certainty of his father's voice in miniature. "I'm asking anyway." Esther thought about her plan, her notebook. 3 years, clean and uncomplicated. "All right," she said. "You are only at the halfway point of this story, and the ground is about to shift completely under everyone's feet. Subscribe now, so the next part finds you. On what Kwon Duk-soo does when his son walks into his study with a maid at his side is not what anyone expected, least of all Esther. Kwon Duk-soo was on the phone when they walked in. Not a casual phone call, the kind that fills silence, the kind where the person on the other end is speaking, and the person listening is absolutely, dangerously still, the way a city goes quiet before something large moves through it. His desk was in front of him, clear of everything except one folder, closed, with no label on it. His eyes landed on Min-ho first. The relief that crossed his face lasted exactly 1 second before it was replaced by something else. The particular expression of a man who had trained himself over many years to turn every feeling into information rather than reaction. He registered Esther standing half a step behind Min-ho. His eyes moved to her, brief and sharp as a pin, then back to his son, while he ended the call without a word of explanation to whoever was on the other end. "Sit," he said. They sat, Min-ho in the chair directly across the desk, Esther in the chair slightly to the side, the position of someone who is present, but not claiming the center. "You were missing this morning," Kwon Duk-soo said to his son. "I know." Min-ho set his audiobook device on his knee and folded both hands over it. It was, Esther noticed, almost exactly the posture his father used. Hands still, deliberately still, as proof that the feelings underneath them were under control. "I heard something last night, through the east corridor wall." Kwon Duk-soo did not move. "Tell me," Min-ho told him. Exactly, completely. In the ordered and precise way, he recounted everything. The time, the voices, the words he had been able to catch, the word for leverage, the other name he had heard that didn't belong to anyone in this house. During all of it, Kwon Duk-soo did not move. When Min-ho finished, so the room was so quiet Esther could hear the building settling around them. Then Kwon Duk-soo said, and his voice was perfectly level, which was somehow worse than if it hadn't been, "How long have you known about the East Corridor acoustics?" Min-ho almost smiled. "About 8 months." A pause. Something shifted in the air between father and son. Something too layered and private for Esther to fully interpret, except that it seemed to contain both exasperation and a complex, a wordless form of pride. Then Kwon Duk-soo looked at Esther. "You found him?" "He found his own way in," Esther said carefully. "I just knew where to look." "How?" "I pay attention to where people go when a place feels too full." A pause. "You do the same thing, I think." The silence that followed that observation was the most loaded silence Esther had experienced in 11 days of loaded silences in this house. Kwon Duk-soo opened the unmarked folder on his desk. Esther expected documents, photographs, the paperwork of a man managing a complicated empire. Instead, the folder contained a single sheet of paper with 12 names on it. He turned it so both of them could see it. Esther read it. Minho, of course, could not, and Kwon Duk-soo, without making it a thing, without the careful performance of accommodation that Esther had seen other people arrange around Minho, simply read the names aloud, evenly, one by one. "These are the people," he said, "who have access to the East Corridor after 10 p.m. 12 names. 3 of them were kitchen staff, not the boys who had moved the bench, different ones, longer tenured. 2 were security personnel. 4 were maintenance. 1 was Mrs. Yong. 1 was Uncle Bae. And 1, Esther's eyes found it before Kwon Duk-soo reached it in his reading, was a name she recognized from the staffing program, the coordinator who had placed her in this house. Her name, Esther Randy. The folder had been prepared before this morning, before Minho had told his father anything, before Esther had gone looking for Minho in the hidden room, before any of this morning had happened, which meant Kwon Duk-soo had already known about the voices in the East Corridor. Esther understood this at the same moment Minho did, because they arrived at it through different routes. Minho through logic, Esther through the specific quality of how Kwon Duk-soo was watching her right now, which was the quality of someone waiting to see what someone does when they realize the ground beneath them is not where they thought it was. "You knew," Esther said. Not an accusation, an observation. "I suspected," he said, "and you put my name on that list. Everyone with East Wing access after 10 is on that list." A pause. "I do not believe you were one of the voices." "Then why?" "Because," Kwon Duk-soo said, not with the flat patience of someone who has decided honesty is more efficient than comfort. "You arrived 11 days ago from a placement coordinator, who I have now identified as connected to the person planning to use my son against me. And that could mean you were placed here deliberately, or it could mean the coordinator was running 2 operations at once, and you were simply convenient." The room was silent, while Esther sat with the information the way she sat with most difficult information, without flinching away from it, turning it over slowly, looking at its actual shape rather than the shape she wished it had. "I'm not connected to anyone in this house except through the placement program," she said. "You've clearly already verified my background. You know this." "I know your background," he agreed. "I don't yet know your coordinator's full network." "Neither do I." She paused. But I can find out." Minho turned his face sharply in her direction. Kwon Duk-soo looked at her for a long moment, with that complete, slightly uncomfortable attention. "Explain," he said. "The coordinator. Her name is in your file, I assume?" He nodded fractionally. "She and I have been in contact once a week since I arrived. Routine check-in, standard for the program. My next contact is in 3 days." Esther kept her voice even. "Now, if someone is using the placement program to move people into this house, a check-in call from me, asking casual questions about the program structure, the other placements in Gyeongju, might tell you something. It might also put you in a position of risk," Kwon Duk-soo said. "With a phone call? If they know you've told me, then we make sure they don't know." She looked at him directly. "I'm not afraid of a phone call. So I'm afraid of sitting in a house where a 12-year-old boy already heard himself described as leverage, and nobody is doing anything about it for another 3 days. Absolute silence. Minho quietly said, "She's right." Kwon Duk-soo looked at his son, then at Esther, then at the ceiling briefly, with the expression of a man updating a very large internal calculation. 3 days, he said finally. Stay in the East Wing. Do your work. Yet do not change your routine in any way. He looked at Esther. Can you do that? I've been doing my work since day one, Esther said. That part is easy. The next 3 days were the strangest of Esther's life, which was saying something, because Esther had lived through a flooding that took out half her street when she was 15, and a border delay that left her sitting in an airport for 31 hours, with nothing but 2 granola bars and a book she'd already read. Strange, because on the surface, nothing changed. She folded linen, she organized shelves, she ate in the staff room, and sent her weekly message home, and argued with Minho on Tuesday morning about whether audiobooks and physical reading were genuinely equivalent experiences, or whether something was lost in the translation. Minho firmly believed nothing was lost. Esther, who had grown up underlining things in pencil, was not fully convinced and said so without apology. Strange, because underneath the surface, everything had changed. She was now aware, with a low and constant hum, that somewhere in the mechanism of this house there was a fracture, and that the fracture had a purpose, and that purpose involved a child. She was aware of the 12 names on the list, and the way she moved through each day, measuring the behavior of the people attached to those names against a baseline she had built in her first 11 days. She noticed things. On Uncle Bay on the second of the 3 days. He took a phone call in the kitchen's back pantry. 4 minutes. When he came out, his left hand was doing the thing hands do when the person attached to them is working hard not to show something. She filed it. One of the security personnel, a man named Mr. Sohn, who worked the East Wing overnight, changed his patrol route slightly on the night of the 2nd day. Not dramatically. On the morning of the 3rd day, she had 12 minutes of coverage near the East Corridor. She filed it. She did not confront either of them. She simply noted. On the morning of the 3rd day, she had the scheduled call with the coordinator. Kwon Duk-soo was 3 rooms away, close enough that a relay of his own people could record the call, far enough that the distance looked normal on any monitoring of her routine. Esther dialed. The coordinator answered with the brisk pleasantness of someone who managed many things at once. Standard questions. How was the placement? Any adjustment concerns? How was the household? Esther answered everything in her normal register. Direct, warm, slightly more talkative than necessary. The way people are on calls when they're genuinely comfortable. Then naturally she said, I've been thinking about staying on, possibly beyond the 3 years. Are there typically renewal options for placements in this tier of household? A pause. Small, but Esther was measuring. There can be, the coordinator said. It depends on the household's assessment. And on the program's other placements in the area? I met someone at the market who mentioned they were also placed through the program, in a household in the western part of Gyeongju. I thought it was interesting. I didn't know the program had expanded so much here. She had not met anyone at any market. There was no one at any market. This was entirely invented. Another pause, longer this time. I'd have to check the current placement roster for that area, the coordinator said. And there was something in her voice now, a slight tightening, a professional smoothing over of surprise. I'm not aware of multiple active placements in Gyeongju currently. Oh, Esther said easily. Maybe I misheard. So anyway, renewal options, you were saying? They finished the call. Esther sat for 1 minute in complete stillness after she hung up. Then she got up, went 3 rooms over, knocked twice, and when she heard Kwon Duk-soo say enter, she walked in. She doesn't know about the other placement, Esther said. Whoever is running the second operation used the program's infrastructure without telling her. She's not the source, she's the cover. Kwon Duk-soo, who had listened to the recording, was already at his desk, with the unmarked folder open to a new page. "The pause," he said, "when you mentioned Western Gyeongju." She was checking whether that information was real. If she were involved, she would have known immediately whether it was. Esther sat down without being invited. "She's not your problem, but she's connected to whoever is." He looked at her for a long time. "You're very good at this," he said. "I'm good at paying attention," Esther said. "That's a different thing." "Not always." He closed the folder. Then, in the quieter voice that Esther was beginning to recognize as the one he used when something actually mattered to him. "Thank you." Esther nodded. She stood to leave. "Esther." She stopped. "The name you heard that night, in the East Corridor. Did Minho tell you what it was?" "He described it as a title rather than a name," Esther said. "Something that sounded like a rank." Kwon Duk-soo nodded slowly. "I know who it is," he said. "I've known for 6 months. I didn't know he had moved this close." A pause. "His name is Won Gi-suk. He was my father's right hand before he became something else." Esther filed the name, filed the something else, which was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. "Is Minho in immediate danger?" she asked directly. Kwon Duk-soo met her eyes, and in the face of the most feared man in Gyeongju, Esther Randy saw, for just one unguarded second, a father who did not know the answer to that question, who was terrified of that, who had been terrified of that for 6 months, and had been carrying it alone in the specific, airless way that very powerful people carry the things that undo them. "I don't know," he said. Esther nodded. "Then we should find out," she said, "before someone else decides for us." The thing nobody saw coming happened that evening. Not something large and dramatic, something small and therefore much worse. Minho's audiobook device, the specific one he used for his advanced coursework, not the spare, disappeared from his room between 2:30 and 4 p.m. His room, which was locked, which had only 3 authorized keys, Minho himself, Mrs. Yang, and the head of household security. It was not in the building. It had been taken. Mrs. Yang discovered the loss at 4:15. By 4:22, Kwon Duk-soo knew. By 4:25, Esther knew, because Minho had sent a message to the staff channel asking if anyone had seen it, the only time Esther had ever seen him ask for something outright, which told her exactly how much the device mattered to him and how frightened he was beneath the careful stillness. She went to his room. He was sitting at his desk, with both hands flat on the surface in front of him. His father's gesture, she realized, the deliberate stillness over controlled feeling. "It has all my coursework on it," he said. 3 months of notes, all the texts I've been annotating. "I know." Esther sat down. "Someone came into my room," he said. Not loudly. Quietly, which was worse. While I was having breakfast, someone with a key came into my room and took the one thing. He stopped. His jaw tightened. "They chose it specifically. They know what matters to me." "Yes," Esther said, "because he was 12 and he was brilliant, and he deserved honesty more than comfort." They want my father afraid," Minho said. "Yes." "They want him to know they can reach me." "Yes." A long silence. "Esther." His voice had shed all its remaining distance now, all of the careful architecture of a child who had taught himself to need nothing from anyone. What was left underneath it was exhausted and young and real. I know, she said. She did not tell him it would be fine. She did not tell him his father would fix it. She did not perform reassurance. Quietly. My uncle used to say that fear quietly. My uncle used to say that fear is just information that hasn't found its category yet. Esther thought about that. That's a good thing to have been told, she said. He died before I could tell him I thought it was good. The room held that for a moment. If you are still here with us, type "I'm still here" in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to be a part of the family. Tell us your thoughts about the story. We love to read them. Now back to it. The device can be replaced, Esther said finally. The notes can be rebuilt. It will take time, and it will be frustrating, and it will not be fair. But they can be rebuilt. She paused. What they were trying to take, the part of you that built those notes in the first place, that part is still exactly where it was. Minho was quiet for a long time. I want to tell you something, he said. All right. When I heard them talking in the corridor, when I understood what they said, my first thought wasn't fear. He paused. My first thought was, I need to tell Esther. The room was very quiet. Esther looked at this boy, one who had decided without permission or ceremony that she was someone worth trusting, who had decided this in the specific, unconditional way of someone who rarely decided anything lightly. She felt something shift in her chest. Not her plan. The plan was still there. 3 years, her notebook, Beatrice's school fees, the small business that was hers to build. All of that was still there. But beside it, taking up space she hadn't allocated, was this. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Not for 3 years, and we are going to figure this out. Minho nodded. One single, precise nod, the kind that means something has been agreed between people who take agreements seriously. What neither of them knew, sitting in that room with its cold window light and its stolen absence of a device, what they could not have known, was that the theft had not been Won Gi-suk's move. It had been a response to his. Because Won Gi-suk had not been watching Minho, he had been watching Esther. Now, this is where this story breaks open. The twist inside the twist, what Won Gi-suk actually knows about Esther's past, and what Kwon Duk-soo does when he finds out, will rearrange everything. Subscribe and stay on this channel. This story has only just shown you its real shape. The letter arrived at Esther's personal post address, the one connected to the staffing program, not the household, on the morning after the device was taken. She found it in her weekly program correspondence, the words in careful printed English. We know that you are a member of the household. We have been asked to contact you about a new service that we think you might be interested in. Please call us at the number below. Thank you. Words in careful printed English. We know about your sister's school fees. Esther read it 3 times. Then she folded it with precise, unhurried hands, put it in the pocket of her uniform, and continued her morning shift. She lasted until the linen corridor, which was empty at 8:45, before she sat down on the floor with her back against the shelf and allowed herself 30 seconds of being genuinely terrified. 30 seconds, exactly. She counted. Beatrice was 17. Beatrice was studying. Beatrice wanted to be a doctor, which was the most Beatrice thing in the world. Beatrice, who had been collecting medical textbooks since she was 11. Beatrice, who had never once looked at the difficult path ahead of her and considered any other direction. A Beatrice whose school fees Esther had carefully, deliberately constructed her entire 3-year plan around. We know about your sister's school fees, which meant one of 2 things. Either the information was meaningless, a threat with no substance, designed to frighten her into action or inaction, or it meant that someone had looked into Esther Randy's life deeply enough to find the most important thread in it, and was now holding that thread with the specific, patient grip of someone who intended to pull it. 30 seconds ended. Esther stood up, smoothed her uniform, picked up the linen basket, and went directly to Kwon Duk-soo's office. He was in a meeting. Mrs. Yang said so with her eyebrows from 10 feet away, adding a secondary message that communicated. This meeting has been going for 2 hours, and the people inside it are not the pleasant kind. Esther waited outside the door in the corridor, standing with her laundry basket, and with the perfect patience of someone who has decided waiting is the correct strategy right now. 40 minutes later, 2 men came out of the office who looked like they had been in a negotiation, the specific, drained quality of people who had been performing composure for an extended period. They glanced at Esther. One of them said something under his breath in dialect. The other one didn't bother. Esther went in. Kwon Duk-soo was at his desk. He looked like the 40-minute meeting had cost him nothing, which, Esther was learning, was not the same as it having cost him nothing. She put the letter on his desk without preamble. He read it again. When did this arrive? His voice was the flat, quiet kind. This morning, through the program mail system. You opened it before bringing it to me. Yes. No apology. I needed to know what it said before I decided how to respond to it. He looked at her. Fortan, how are you going to respond to it? That depends on what it actually is, Esther said. Is it a real threat, meaning they have access to my sister's situation and can act on it? Or is it information they gathered to make me believe they have power they don't actually have? Won Gi-suk, Kwon Duk-soo said slowly, has access to financial networks across 4 countries. Your sister's school fees are, he paused. Tell me, Esther told him. The amount, the institution, the account it came from, her account, set up through the placement program's banking partner, which she now understood meant it was visible to anyone with access to the program's financial infrastructure. Kwon Duk-soo was quiet for a moment. He can reach it, he said. Can you counter-reach it? Esther asked. A pause. Yes. Then do that first, before anything else. She kept her voice level. Then we can talk about what he wants from me. Kwon Duk-soo looked at her for a long moment. What he wants from you, he said carefully, is for you to become a source of information about this household. About me. Another pause. And about Minho's movements. I know, Esther said. That's what leverage is for. You're not afraid. I'm very afraid, Esther said. I'm just not letting it make my decisions. She paused. Can you protect Beatrice's fees? By tonight, he said. Then I want to respond to this letter, Esther said. But not the way they expect. What Kwon Duk-soo did not tell Esther, not that morning, not yet, was that the investigation he had run on Won Gi-suk over the previous 6 months had turned up something unexpected. Won Gi-suk had not chosen Esther at random. He had chosen her because of a connection that predated the placement program by 3 years, a connection that went back to Esther's home country, to a business deal that had gone wrong, to a man who had lost money he was owed, and had filed it in the specific, patient ledger of wrongs that men like Won Gi-suk maintained across decades. The man who had lost the money was an associate of Won Gi-suk's, a local operator in Esther's home city. A man Esther had never met, had no connection to, had no knowledge of. But her father had. Her father, who had died when Esther was 14, and who Esther had spent 9 years carefully not thinking about because the grief was too structurally complicated to look at directly. Her father had apparently, in the year before his death, been involved in a business arrangement with this operator. Money had moved. Then the arrangement had collapsed. The money had not moved back. The operator had noted the debt, had watched it over the years. Sut had watched Esther build her careful plan and buy her plane ticket and enter Won Gi-suk's network through the placement program's infrastructure, and had said, "Here is a way to recover something." Kwon Duk-soo had known this for 4 days. He had not told Esther because he was, and he knew this about himself. I recognized it with the particular clarity of someone who had done enough damage by acting on incomplete information to have learned the cost of it. He was not yet certain how this information would land. He was not certain whether Esther's grief and surprise and the specific complicated anger of finding out your dead father's choices have followed you across the world. He was not certain whether those things would make her more effective in this situation or less. He was, but in a way he was not accustomed to being around people he employed, protective of her. He was aware of this. He was aware it complicated things. Minho knew before Esther did. This was because Minho had been, for the past 3 days, doing what Minho did when he was frightened and couldn't act directly. He had been researching. He had sources his father didn't know about. Other students on private academic networks. An online community of young researchers who shared resources across borders. A particular professor at a university in another city, who Minho had corresponded with for 2 years via an email address that was technically registered under a pseudonym because Minho was 12 and understood the value of privacy. He had been looking into Won-gi-suk. What he had found was more than his father's official investigation contained, but because Minho had approached it from an entirely different direction. Not the financial networks, not the criminal connections, but the personal history. Won-gi-suk's early biography, his associations before he became what he currently was, the paper trail of a younger man's choices. And in that paper trail, he had found Esther's father's name. He sat with this for 1 full day, which was, for Minho, who processed information at a rate that made most adults uncomfortable, a very long time. He sat with it the way he sat with difficult things, completely, without looking away, until he understood its full shape. Then he called Esther to his room. She came in, sat down, looked at him with the direct, steady gaze that he had come to think of, privately, as her default. The expression of someone whose attention is a thing she gives fully or not at all. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to know I'm telling you because I think you need to know it. Not because I don't trust you, because I do." Esther waited. He told her about her father. The room was very quiet when he finished. Esther sat with her hands in her lap. Her face did not rearrange itself dramatically. She had the particular stillness of someone receiving information that, he realized watching her, was not entirely news. Not fully. Not the details, but the shape of it, perhaps. The sense of something owed and uncollected, following her further than it had any right to. My father," she said quietly. "He died when I was 14. I know, I'm sorry. He was..." She stopped. "He made choices I didn't know about." "Yes. And someone has been holding those choices this entire time, waiting for a reason to use them." "Won-gi-suk's associate, yes." Esther was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "My father tried to pay it back. The money. I found a letter once, when I was 16, going through his things, from someone he owed money to. He had arranged a payment plan. He died before he could." "Before." She stopped. Minho sat in complete stillness, in the way he had learned to be still. Not absence, not looking away, but presence without demand, which was one of the hardest and most important forms of stillness there was. "He was trying to fix it," Esther said. "I know," Minho said. "I found the payment records." Esther looked up. "They exist in the archived financial filings of the associate's company," Minho said. 2 payments made before your father died. The arrangement was real. Won-gi-suk's associate buried the record when your father died. He presented the debt as unpaid. But the payments exist." A pause. "The debt was not what they said it was." Esther looked at this 12-year-old boy with his research and his precision and his way of moving through the world so carefully and so completely. "You found that," she said. "I told you," he said, with a trace of the familiar, exact quiet that she had come to recognize as his version of warmth. "I research everyone in this house." When Esther went to Kwan Duk Su that evening, she did not go with the letter, and she did not go with fear. She went with Min Ho's printed records, which he had sent to her device with the focused efficiency of a researcher closing a case, and she laid them on the desk beside the letter. Kwan Duk Su looked at the records for a long time. "My son found these," he said, and it was not a question. "Yes." Another silence. Something moved across his face, layered and too private for Esther to name, but she had the sense it was connected to the brother Uncle Bay had mentioned, to someone brilliant and gone, to the rhythm of a voice that lived on in a different throat. "The debt is not valid," Esther said. "My father's name, what they're using against me, it's built on a record they falsified. If you can surface this through your networks." "Won Gi-suk's associate loses his leverage," Kwan Duk Su said, "which means Won Gi-suk loses his angle on you, which means you are no longer useful to him as a tool." He looked at her, "which may mean he moves to a different approach. A more direct one," Esther said. "Yes," he paused. "Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready for whatever protects Min Ho," Esther said. The silence that followed lasted for a long time. Then Kwan Duk Su said something Esther had not expected. "Why?" he asked. Not dismissively, not suspiciously. With the genuine weight of a man who had spent a great deal of his life unable to trust anyone's motivations, and who was now sitting across from someone whose motivation he could not locate in any category he was familiar with. "He's a child," Esther said simply. "He's in danger, and he was kind to me." "He was kind to you," Kwan Duk Su repeated. He told me I was right about something on the second day," Esther said. "In an argument about books. He didn't have to. He did it because it was accurate." She paused. "People who are accurate when it costs them something, those people are worth protecting." Kwan Duk Su was quiet for a long time. "He has his uncle's way of being right," he said finally. The words were careful and clearly cost him something. "I know," Esther said quietly. "Uncle Bay told me." Something in Kwan Duk Su's face shifted, not dramatically, not in the way of a man unraveling, but in the way of something sealed for a long time, finding a small crack in itself and letting something out through it. Brief and immediately reclosed. "I have an operation planned," he said. 3 days from now. It will deal with Won Gi-suk's access point, the person inside this house who has been feeding him information. When it happens, it will happen quickly. And I need you and Min Ho in the East Wing, away from the main house. All right. I need you to stay with him, he said. That night. Not as a maid, as... He paused, searched for the word. As whoever you are to him. Esther looked at this man, the most feared man in Gyeongju, behind whose severity lived a father, sitting with a grief he had carried for 14 years, and a fear for his child that had no shape he could fight directly. I'll be there, she said. She stood to leave. Esther, she stopped. The business you want to open, when you go home. He paused. If the plan requires capital beyond what you've saved. No, she said, clearly, gently, without embarrassment. Thank you, but it needs to be mine. A long pause. I understand, he said, and from the quality of how he said it, the specific, recognizing quality of someone who has also built something that needed to be theirs, or it was nothing, Esther believed that he did. 3 days. And on the morning of the second of those 3 days, Esther received a message that stopped everything. Not from the coordinator, Not from Won Gi-suk. From Beatrice. Dottie. Someone called Mama. Said you're in danger. Said you should come home. Who are these people? What is happening there? Esther read it standing in the east corridor. Someone had contacted her family, which meant Won Gi-suk knew the other angle wasn't working. The financial leverage, the letter, and the pressure on Esther directly. And so he had moved to this, her mother, Beatrice, the people she had crossed the world to protect. Esther sent one message back to Beatrice. I'm safe. Lock the door. Don't speak to anyone who calls again. I'll explain everything. I love you. Then she sent a message to Kwon Duk-soo. He's moved to my family. We can't wait 3 days. His response came in 40 seconds. My office. Now. The plan changed in the next 4 hours. So Esther sat across from Kwon Duk-soo while he made calls. 3 of them, each one brief and in a register so low she could hear the sound, but not the content, and watched him reassemble his strategy in real time. There was something remarkable about watching a person who was genuinely good at something do that thing under pressure. The fear didn't leave. She could see it at the edges of his precision, that specific fear he kept contained. But it didn't interfere. It became fuel. When he was done, he set his phone down. The source inside this house, he said, is Mr. Sohn, the security guard, the one who had changed his patrol route. He's been feeding Won Gi-suk information for 8 months, Kwon Duk-soo said. Tonight, instead of 3 days from now, we move. What does that mean? Esther asked. It means Mr. Sohn is going to receive a communication from Won Gi-suk's network tonight. One that we send, or one that instructs him to bring Minho to a specific location in the house at a specific time. He paused. Minho will not be there, but people I trust will be. And Minho, with you, East Wing, the hidden room. Esther nodded. Then, your family. My people are already at the coordinator's location, he said, and I've contacted someone I trust in your home country. Your mother and sister will have a car outside their home within the hour. He met her eyes. They will not be touched. Esther held this for a moment. The weight of it, that this man, in the middle of his own crisis, had extended his network across the world to a family that had nothing to do with his empire, because they mattered to someone who had helped his son. Thank you, she said, and she meant it fully, the way she meant the things she said. He nodded once. Go get Minho, he said. Take him to the East Wing. Don't tell him the full plan. Tell him what he needs to know. He'll ask questions. He always does, Esther said. Answer the ones you can. A pause. He trusts you. Use that carefully. It wasn't a warning about her. She understood that. It was a father saying, my child's trust is the most valuable thing in this room, more valuable than any of this. Handle it like it is. I know, she said. She went to Minho's room. He was at his desk with a temporary braille display his father had arranged, smaller than his original device, and he had said nothing about the difference, but she could tell from the set of his shoulders that it was an adjustment. Minho adjusted to everything. That was one of the saddest and most extraordinary things about him. We need to go to the East Wing, Esther said. He turned immediately. Now? Now. He didn't ask why in the corridor, which she had come to recognize as his version of trust. He asked why once he had moved, rather than using the question as a reason not to. Then they walked through the east corridor in the quiet of early evening. Esther slightly ahead, her footsteps the ones he followed without being asked. In the small room at the end of the East Wing, their room now, in the way that places become theirs through the significant things that happen in them. Minho sat against the wall, and Esther sat across from him, and she told him what he needed to know. Mr. Sohn, the plan, the next few hours. Minho listened completely. When she finished, then carefully, "And you're always 100%. "Yes," Esther said. Then carefully, "And you're always managing the distance that creates." A long pause. "He thinks protecting me means keeping things away from me," Minho said quietly. "I think," Esther said, "that he's learning something different." Slowly. She paused. "You both are?" Minho turned his face toward the high window. The same gesture as always. The face turned toward light he couldn't see, as though he had made peace with the direction of it being enough. "My uncle," he said. "Did you know? My father has never once spoken to me about him directly. 14 years, and he has never said his name to me out loud." Esther thought about the corridor, about Kwon Duk-soo saying he has his uncle's voice with the careful cost of it. "He said his name to me," she said quietly. "Recently." Minho went very still. "Onadea Hyuk," Esther said. "He told me his name was Dae Hyuk." The room was very, very quiet. "That's..." Minho's voice was slightly different now, stripped of its most careful layer, the way voices go when something unexpected touches something real. "He's never..." "I know." "Why would he tell you?" Esther thought about that. "I think," she said slowly, "that sometimes it's easier to say the things that matter most to someone who isn't inside the grief with you. Someone who can hold it without," she paused, "without it costing them the same way." Minho was quiet for a long time. "I look like him," he said finally. "My uncle. I've been told. I can't see myself, so I can't know, but..." A pause. "Sometimes my father looks at me and I can feel what's on his face before it closes again." Esther said nothing. Some things didn't need an answer, just a witness. "Dae Hyuk," Minho said softly, trying the name in his own mouth for the first time. And 2 hours passed. They talked about the research Minho had been doing, about Esther's plans for the business, about a book they had both apparently read at completely different ages and arrived at completely different conclusions about. Minho had strong opinions about everything, delivered with the specific, comfortable certainty of someone who has done the reading and expects to be challenged. Esther challenged him as a matter of course, and he responded to being challenged the way healthy things respond to weather, by growing. At some point, Esther realized she was laughing at something he had said, genuinely laughing, the kind that catches you off guard, and that Minho was grinning, a real grin, unmanaged and wide, the kind she hadn't seen on his face before. This is what they were doing when the door opened. Kwon Duk-soo stood in the doorway. He looked at his son, grinning, relaxed, leaning slightly toward Esther's voice, and something happened on his face that he did not immediately close. He stood in it for a moment, this expression that held everything he had built all of this for, the reason behind the fear and the power and the terrible, careful love of a man who had lost enough to know exactly what loss costs. Minho turned toward the door. "Father," he said. "It's done," Kwon Duk-soo said. His voice was steady. "Mr. Son is..." A pause. "Dealt with. Won Gi-suk's access to this house is severed." Minho exhaled. A real exhale, the kind that has been held for a long time. "And Esther's family?" Minho asked immediately. Kwon Duk-soo looked at his son for a moment. The fact that Minho had asked first, before any question about himself, before anything else, registered on his face as something he was storing carefully. "Safe," he said. "Confirmed 20 minutes ago." Esther closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. Won Gi-suk?" she asked when she opened them. "He will not be a problem," Kwon Duk-soo said, in the flat, specific tone of a man for whom that sentence contained a great many things he was not going to elaborate on. Esther accepted this, There were parts of Kwon Duk-soo's world that she had decided, with clear eyes, were not hers to ask about. The unexpected thing, the last one, the one that turned the story inside out, happened the next morning. Esther was called to Kwon Duk-soo's office at 8 a.m. Mrs. Young's eyebrows communicated, "This is not routine, but it is not alarming." Esther went in. Kwon Duk-soo was at his desk. There was a folder on it, but this one had a label. The label had Esther's name on it. "Sit," he said. She sat. "I want to tell you something," he said, "that I should have told you 8 days ago." He told her about Won Gi-suk, about the associate, about her father. He told her all of it, the parts she knew, the parts she had pieced together, and the one part she had not known yet, the final part of it. "The associate," he said, "did not just falsify the debt record when your father died." Esther waited. "He also took something from the settlement your father had been arranging, a portion of the returned money, which your father had been collecting to pay back. The associate redirected it to one of Won Gi-suk's accounts." A pause. "When I dismantled Won Gi-suk's network last night, as that account was one of the ones that was recovered." Esther looked at the folder with her name on it. Kwon Duk-soo opened it. Inside was a transfer document. "This is the money your father was trying to return," he said. "Recovered and redirected to an account in your name." Esther looked at the number on the document. She looked at it for a long time. It was more than 3 years of her salary. It was more than her projected savings for the business. It was the amount her father had tried to pay back, plus the years of interest it had accumulated sitting in a criminal account, plus the portion the associate had taken. It was, she realized slowly, her father's plan finally completed. Esther sat very still. She thought about a 14-year-old girl going through her father's things and finding a letter, a payment arrangement, a man trying to fix what he had broken before time ran out. He was trying, she said. Her voice was even. Barely. He had paid back 60% of it before he died, Kwon Duk-soo said quietly. The record exists. Min-ho found it, and I verified it through my own channels. A pause. He was not the man the associate presented him as. Esther looked at her hands. She was going to need a moment with this. A private moment, in her own room, with her notebook, and perhaps a message to Beatrice, and perhaps, for the first time in 9 years, the ability to think about her father without the structure of complicated grief pressing down on every memory. But not yet. I can't accept this money, she said. Kwon Duk-soo looked at her. It is your father's money, he said. Returned. I know what it is. She met his eyes. And I know that it came from dismantling a criminal network, and that accepting it makes me part of a story I'm not sure I want to be part of. A very long silence. You are the most, he stopped, started again. Most people, he said carefully, who have spent time in this house have found ways to benefit from proximity to my position. Some subtly, some not. A pause. You are the first person who has consistently refused every version of that. I'm not refusing out of principle, Esther said. I'm refusing because the business needs to be mine. The whole thing, the building of it, the risk of it, the savings that make it possible. If I accept this, it becomes something else. She paused. Does that make sense? Yes, Kwon Duk-soo said, with the recognizing quality. Again. But, she paused, Beatrice, her school fees. If the amount my father already paid, if that portion specifically could be redirected to her education account as a continuation of what he started. She stopped. That's not me accepting something for myself. That's completing what he tried to do. Kwon Duk-soo looked at her for a long moment, Then he made a note on the document. "Done," he said. 3 weeks later, things in the Kwan household had settled into a new shape. Mr. Sohn was gone. 2 of the kitchen staff had also left, quietly, without confrontation, in the way that departures happen in houses where the master's reach is long and nobody wants to test its length. The bench that had been moved into Minho's path had been removed from the house entirely, which was probably excessive, but which felt, to everyone who knew the story, like the right amount. The placement coordinator had been contacted by Kwon Duk-soo's legal team. The program's infrastructure was being reviewed. The coordinator herself was cooperating. She had, as Esther had assessed, been used rather than complicit. And the review was proceeding cleanly. Beatrice's school fees arrived in her account with a message that simply said, "From your father's account, forwarded." Esther had written the message herself. She and Beatrice had talked for 40 minutes on a video call, and Esther had told her daughter's version of the story, edited for age and distance. And Beatrice had cried, and then pulled herself together in the specific Beatrice way that looked exactly like their mother. Esther had cried after the call ended, in her room, in the East Wing, for about 11 minutes. Then she had opened her plan notebook. She had crossed out the original 3-year projection. Below it, she had written a new one. The timeline was the same. The business was the same. The savings were recalculated now that Beatrice's fees were handled. The plan was still hers. Still built in the way she needed to build it. It was, she decided, even better than the original. Minho's new audiobook device arrived. A better one than the one that had been taken. Specced with features his original hadn't had. He had said, when it arrived, that the replacement was objectively superior in 4 specific ways, which he listed. Then he had paused and added, in the quiet, brief, unelaborated way of someone who doesn't perform gratitude, but feels it completely. "Thank you for the other night." Esther had said, "Nah, the arguing about books was good for both of us." He had almost smiled. They had another argument about books 2 days later. He was right about part of it. She was right about the other part. They were both satisfied with this outcome. On a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after everything, Esther was finishing the East Wing linen when Kwon Duk-soo appeared in the corridor. He did not appear to be doing the watch, the silent survey of his household. He appeared to be, specifically, walking to where she was. He stopped a few feet away. "Minho," he said, "has been asking Mrs. Yong if the Tuesday and Thursday arrangement can be formalized." Esther looked up. "The arguing about books." He described it, Kwon Duk-soo said, as an academic peer exchange. Esther considered this. "He's 12. "I know. He's also not wrong, necessarily." "I know that, too." A pause. "I wanted to ask you directly, not through Mrs. Yong, whether you're willing." Esther thought about her plan, from her schedule, the way her Tuesdays and Thursdays had begun to have, in the past few weeks, a particular shape to them. The shape of things that matter, sitting inside the shape of things that are purposeful. "I'm willing," she said. Kwon Duk-soo nodded. He began to turn away. Then he stopped. He said, and it was clearly something he had been working up to, in the way that people work up to the things they need to say and have been not saying. His name was Dae-hyuk, my brother. Or he would have... A pause. Long. He liked people who were right about things. Esther looked at this man, standing in his own corridor, saying his brother's name out loud. "Tell Minho that," she said quietly. "Say that exact thing to him." Kwon Duk-soo looked at her. "He needs to hear it from you," Esther said. "Not through a story. From you." A very long silence. "I know," he said. And then he walked back down the corridor toward his son's room, with the particular quality of a man walking toward something he had been avoiding for 14 years. Not running, not performing readiness he didn't have. but walking steadily in the way that Esther Randy walked through every corridor of every difficult thing she had ever moved through. One grounded step at a time. Esther stood in the East Wing linen corridor with her basket and the quiet of the house around her, and thought about her plan. Her good, clean, specific plan, and how it was still intact, still hers, still exactly what she had come here for. She also thought about how the best plans are the ones sturdy enough to hold extra weight without breaking. The ones that can carry, alongside their original purpose, the things you didn't plan for, the Tuesday arguments, the hidden rooms, the names said out loud at last, the father walking toward his son. She picked up her basket. She went back to work. Some people enter your life without a single plan to stay, and end up being the reason everything holds together. Esther came to fold linen and save money and go home. She stayed in every way that mattered, because a boy reached for his cane on a cold floor, and she was the only one who moved. If this story touched something real in you, subscribe now, because the next story we tell is already waiting for someone exactly like you.